Dave Anastasi, former player, 60 to 62, and coached from 68 till I retired in 99. Actually, I coached 2000 also.
What do you recall about your playing days in North Tonawanda?
Well, the veteran era was still going, and they hadn't had a championship team since they stopped PGs, allowing PGs to play, and that was in about 49 or 50. So from 1949 to the 60s, there wasn't a championship. So the 60 team was the first undefeated team since the former era, and then so we went undefeated in 60 and undefeated in 62.
How was Coach Vetter as a coach?
Very structured. Whatever he ran, you ran in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th, nothing changed. The numbering didn't change, and he only got in trouble when the game changed because he was still basically single wing up to about the end of my junior year. Then we started to use the T formation, which everybody else had been using for 10 years. But he, probably the biggest thing was the emotional aspect that he would add, his pregame talks and just the glare. If he made a mistake, he didn't need to say anything. His look would, you pretty well sum it up. But he was very involved with Ben Schwartzwalder from Syracuse at the time, and so a lot of Schwartzwalder's philosophy Vetter shared. So,
Did you take any of his coaching aspects and take it and implement it in your coaching?
yeah, I think he was quite involved with the players. I think the biggest thing is he is, I think we considered coaching an extension of teaching. And at that time, you didn't have people from the outside pretty much coaching the teams. They were, Vetter, Pluak, McGlisco, everybody taught within the district. So if something happened in the classroom, he knew about it very quickly. And the same was true with myself, where a teacher came down and said, I won't use any players' names in particular, but you better, we had to sign a 3-day pass, a pregame pass, which would allow you to play when we were in school. So if you were in trouble in the classroom, you may not be able to play that weekend. So it kind of cut the discipline.
That went for grades as well, too, didn't you? You have to maintain grades?
We had the 5-week, you had a 5-week slip that you had to get signed, and then the report cards came in at 10 weeks. And if you weren't doing well, they gave you 5 weeks to straighten it out. But then at the end of 10 weeks, and fortunately, to my knowledge, none of them didn't have a problem.
You played with a lot of good ball players, John Chisera.
Yeah.
And many that I can't think of their names right off the top of my head. What lasting impression did you have from that 1960s team?
The 60 team was, that team was loaded. They had linemen that had played together for, this was a third year, like Wageman and Jamula both had been 3-year players for Vetter, and that team had Frank Castelline, Chisera. Bob Frank was the quarterback, but at that time the quarterback was basically another lineman in the backfield. We were in the single wing, so they were. But probably Chisera was a junior, I was a sophomore, and Castelline would have been a senior then. But that it was dominant, but again, it was an era. The whole NT history is a series of eras. That was almost up till the late 60s, the structure of the league. I mean, you had the NFL league until early 70s, and then they went to the divisional structure. But prior to that, you had the PG era. And I know that when my dad was in school, they couldn't get local teams to play us, so they were playing St. Bonaventure freshmen, Niagara University freshmen. They had to play college teams to get enough games to play because people wouldn't play against us. And you almost couldn't make the team until you PG'd.
You played in the Niagara Frontier League. You coached when it became sectionalized. Any preference to either one?
I miss the tradition part of the NFL. You had local teams playing local teams. Your travel time was cut down. I mean, I saw as many Tonawanda games when I was in high school as I did NT. They played on Saturday night, we played Friday night. So you got to scout whoever your opponent was, even as a player. We went to 2 or 3 games. If we played Friday night, we'd go Saturday afternoon and Saturday night to see future opponents ourselves. They lost that, and I think the sectional format is great in that the big schools play the big schools, but unfortunately it's tough to develop any kind of rivalry because you may not have the same schedule next year. And so I won't diminish any era, but the era that I had was brutal because we just played Orchard Park, Jamestown, Lancaster. I mean, every week was, but it was good football because it was all, you didn't have any kind of mismatch, and if you did it really didn't show up. One year or another, West Seneca West might be a great team, and so it was good. I think if anything has changed, I think the coaching right now is much better than the coaching was before. NT went through when they lost those coaches for 10 years, you could see both the level of play as well as the discipline and the tradition. You could see it. I went to the TNT game this year and I couldn't believe it. It's not the same tradition-wise. And
in your coaching career here at NT, were there any teams that you look forward to playing against, and were there teams that you dreaded playing against?
Well, I look forward to playing the best teams. Like, I never would put a weak team for my non-division game. I would always ask for a St. Joe's, or if somebody, if we weren't playing, for example, when they switched divisions, if Orchard Park wasn't in my division, they would realign every year. Like Wheatfield would come in one year, and then they'd bump a team out into the other division. So I would ask to play Orchard Park for my I wanted to play the best. If you're going to claim at the end of the year that you were the best team in Division I, you better be able to justify it by playing the best teams in Division I. So that's why I never tried to play an easy opponent. And unfortunately, probably the other thing other than the coaching caliber, that 10 years that NT lost there in the middle was a combination of the coaching, but it was a combination of very poor athletic directors. And programs beat programs. And whether NT didn't just go down in football. Every major sport is not the same during that era. And right now, they're just starting to get a flicker of hope to become what they once were.
So you're talking about from 2009, or right after the championship,
right,
to today.
Yeah, and I mean, even Jancy's last year before, it was a huge drop off in talent. Their state championship team they were loaded with players. you would hope to get one of them every 10 years. They had like 10 of them in 1 year. I mean, and they were gifted, and they certainly were, I thought, the best team in the state. And
Speaking of best teams, your 1979 team was pretty good as well, too.
oh, yeah, that would have been an interesting matchup. It was a different. They were the most never quit team I've ever seen. Even the Rich Stadium game, we were behind, and with about a minute and a half to go, and they had the ball, and one of the kids said, "Don't worry, coach, we'll get the ball in the next play and we'll win it in overtime." I'm sitting there, yeah, okay. Next play, we hit the guy, ball pops loose, and we scored with about a minute to go and then won it in overtime. But they were big, physical, street fighter type people. They weren't going to be choir boys, too many of them, but they were dedicated to winning and would not accept losing.
How did you know, or when did you know it was time to stop coaching and to get out of NT football?
Well, it was, I can't do anything a little bit. So even though I knew I was going to retire, I could have continued coaching even after I retired, but I was upset that too many, and I won't mention names, but too many coaches kept their coaching job for 8 to 10 years after they retired in various sports. And they keep saying, oh, we can never get any young teachers involved or young coaches. Well, one of the reasons is old ones won't quit. So I said, since I considered coaching an extension of teaching, when I was going to be done teaching, I was going to retire in 2000, but the state offered an early incentive, so I took that, and I did coach till 2000. But I wasn't going to continue, even though I could have. So I knew right then, and then even Eric asked me, could you? No, I can't. Because I can't be a little bit involved. And could you come down? Like this year I did, they asked me to talk to the kids before the TNT game. That's happened maybe 2 or 3 times where they've asked me to come down and talk about tradition and things like that. But I knew the day I decided I was retiring that was it.
If you were meeting somebody for the first time and they wanted to know about the tradition of North Tonawanda football, what would you tell them?
Well, it's really, when you only hear that, I mean, as a kid, I would say my feelings growing up, like Frank Pilata was one of my heroes, and in 9th grade I wore number 15 and I was a fullback. I wanted to, you went to the games. At that time Vetter Stadium was not Vetter Stadium, it was just the stadium. And if I hadn't played football for NT, that was my thought at the time, my life, I couldn't have been a success in life. I mean, that was so meaningful to me growing up. And it was a tradition that was poured into you from the time my parents took me to games when I was a baby. I mean, you went every week, every Friday night. It was a TNT game. I mean, we were getting, in 60 and 62, if we were playing trot, you'd have 2,500 to 3,000 people for a trot game. And it wasn't like they were a powerhouse, but it was, even today, other than the Canal Fest, for the Twin Cities, there is no event that draws more people than the TNT game. There's nothing in the Twin Cities that's more important than the TNT football game. Even though the tradition itself, they're in different divisions, the meaning isn't as much for the players as it is for the Twin Cities.
You were part of the NT football team for about 40 years. Anything you want to add? Something that I didn't ask? Something that's important to you that you'd like to tell people?
Well, I think what happens is too many people try to say, oh, this was the best team ever, or these players were the very, I mean, you have a thing with 100 top athletes in North Tonawanda history. I could give them 100. Of those, probably 40 are legit. But, for example, the Urbano brothers played in the 50s. You know, they both full rides to Tennessee. One was a captain as a freshman. I mean, we're not talking going to Brockport like I ended up going to. You're talking Tennessee. You had Nick Seebeck playing professional football. He's not one of our top 100 athletes. You had Rudy Agansky playing Canadian pro ball in Canada for 14 or 15 years. He's not one of our top athletes. So I think it's great that people are concerned about the history, but I don't know if enough research is done for them to really justify, I wouldn't pick on one sport and say this person didn't belong, but at the same time, I think you have to accept each era as it was and don't say, I don't know, maybe the 1932 team could have beaten our state champion. I don't know, you know, they didn't have face masks, they didn't have anything, you know. So I think that's the biggest thing, is to try to compare eras when there is no comparison.
Is it, by the same token, is it fair or unfair to compare coaches? A Vetter, yourself, a Jancy?
I don't know, because again, they're different. Like right now, it's a totally different division they're in. So it's really, you're talking, I guess comparing coaches is like trying to compare eras. And if I had things to do over again, I perhaps would have done things differently, but I would doubt it. I mean, I knew what I had to give, and it maybe wasn't the best, but it was my best. And each coach probably feels the same way.
As one final question, as a player and as a coach, how do you want to be remembered as?
As a teacher. It's as simple as that. I used to be introduced as NT's football coach, and I said, yes, and I also teach math. So I'd rather be remembered as the great teacher, because I considered coaching as an extension of teaching.
Terrific.
Keith Pascucci, I just wanted to ask Coach A a couple questions. Do you remember the first practice we had for the Resel Roadrunners?
Yes, I do. In fact, I remember the first two guys. The first guy that in the first tackling drill was Tim Lund, and he got hit and swallowed his tongue. So that was the first thing, we had to get that. And second was Bob Schwegler, and he got knocked out. So the first two people, and I'm sitting there saying, this is going to be a long career, you know.
Well, remember we had to run from Resel to Ohio School to practice.
Right.
Half of us didn't have unis.
Right, and carry the bags.
Yep.
And I learned a valuable lesson too, because Ron Chavetta, I was going to cut him because he weighed 95 pounds, and I said, he is going to get destroyed. And he was in tears, so he came in the next day with Little League, a plastic helmet,
Yep.
and said, well, stupidly I said, yeah, go ahead. And I mean, it was like turning loose a demon. He was just phenomenal. He's in the Hall of Fame. So yeah, I remember it well.
Yeah, it was a good time, and I played your first year. My son played your last year, coaching, and a lot of memories.
Oh, it was, and they're all fond memories, because you know, you still see them. It's nice when they still call you coach.
Yep.
You know, it's very meaningful.
Thanks a lot for coming down.
Oh, thank you.